denied. Just imagine you take a flight to a different country and you get there. I mean, you prepare yourself, you get ready for this. And once you get there, they say, no, sorry, you're going back home. For what reason? You don't know. There's no explanation.
Saudi Arabia suspended key visas for Nigerians, including Umrah, business, and family visits, in a sweeping move before Hajj 2025. But why always Nigeria? Why these types of visas? And is this really about safety or something far more targeted? Let's find out. Saudi Arabia didn't call it a ban. They never do. Instead, they called it a temporary suspension. That's how it always begins, with careful phrasing, with sterile bureaucratic language that turns a discriminatory act into a mere adjustment. No drama, just logistics. But let's be honest, these aren't just suspended pieces of paper. These are lives interrupted, families blocked, businesses paused, and prayers deferred. And when the kingdom uses this polished, professional tone, saying this is about safety and management, it disguises the fact that this is something targeted, not universal. Something directed not at behavior, but at identity. And for reasons left unspoken, that identity seems to look like a Nigerian passport, over and over again. What's more striking is how these types of suspensions always start with African countries and rarely end anywhere else. The visa halt covered 14 nations, yes, but when the headlines hit, it was Nigeria that got the spotlight and the sting. The world didn't rush to clarify, it rushed to judge, as if it was normal for Nigerians to be blocked from entry, even for religious or family reasons, as if we've come to accept it as just another part of international travel. Nigerians might be denied. That's just how it goes. But think about this. What other country has to constantly defend its innocence just to apply for a religious visit? What other nation's entire population gets treated as a visa risk class? This isn't just about formality or protocol. This is about perception, about who is considered manageable and who is seen as suspicious. And Saudi Arabia isn't alone in playing this game. Gulf nations, European consulates, and even African embassies abroad have all at some point taken part in the ritual of filtering Nigerians out of the easy approval pool. The process becomes the punishment, the delay becomes the message, and the language, cold, impersonal, "We regret to inform you," becomes the veil that hides prejudice. It's especially painful because it never begins with violence or open hostility. No one screams. No one points fingers. It all happens through forms, portals, and email notices. One moment you're preparing for a family reunion or a pilgrimage. Next, you're part of a silent group, not detained, not rejected outright, but simply not allowed. Quietly sidelined, quietly blocked. That's the real power of soft repression. It doesn't spark outrage, it just wears you down. It creates a world where certain people, often African, often Nigerian, start to believe that travel itself is a privilege, not a right. And that's the exact mental terrain in which injustice flourishes. When the language is mild, resistance feels dramatic. When discrimination hides behind temporary suspension, complaints sound like overreaction. And here's the twist. Many Nigerians affected by this move didn't even plan to perform Hajj. Some were just going to visit family. Some had business meetings, trade negotiations, or leisure trips. Yet they were lumped into a broad category and filtered out, not because of what they planned to do, but because of where they came from. Saudi officials said this was not a political decision. But if it isn't political, then it's even worse, because it's structural. It means that Nigerian exclusion has become an administrative habit, not a controversy. That's what happens when discrimination becomes so common, it's embedded in policy without needing justification. Which begs the question, if this pattern is so calm, so routine, and so quietly accepted, what's driving it beneath the surface? Is it about faith management or about faith-based hierarchy? Is this about logistics or control? Who gets to move freely, and who gets slowed down until they give up? To answer that, we need to move beyond the paperwork, beyond the what, and into the why. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. It's easy to say that a visa policy is just bureaucracy. it's harder to admit that it's also psychology. But when Nigerians are the first to face blanket suspensions, the first to be flagged in international systems, and the first to be named in restrictions across continents, the message becomes impossible to ignore. The Nigerian traveler is not seen as neutral. He is a risk. She is a red flag. They are not treated like pilgrims, tourists, or professionals. They are treated like a potential problem before they even apply. This isn't paranoia, it's repetition. And it always starts the same way, not with evidence, but with assumptions. When Saudi Arabia suspended visas, it didn't provide a breakdown of who was misusing them. They didn't say, here's how many cases of fraud or overcrowding came from Nigeria last year. They didn't need to, because the stereotype was already doing the heavy lifting. The narrative writes itself. Nigerians overstay, Nigerians smuggle, Nigerians bypass. That's how prejudice operates in diplomatic systems, by crafting an unwritten reputation that replaces data with default suspicion. And Saudi Arabia isn't inventing this on its own. The stereotype of the Nigerian traveler has been nurtured by decades of global mischaracterization. Western media often paints Nigerians as scammers, criminals, and desperate migrants. Visa officers read those same headlines. Border agents absorb the same caricatures. And over time, it forms an informal policy that doesn't need to be spoken. Check the Nigerian twice. So when Saudi authorities say this visa suspension isn't political, what they mean is, it doesn't have to be. The political part is already baked into the system. By the time a Nigerian applies, they're already walking uphill, not because of anything they've done, but because of what others expect of them. This suspicion isn't just felt at borders, it bleeds into every layer of the process. Nigerian applicants are asked for more documents. They wait longer for replies. They're more likely to be rejected without explanation. Even when they meet every requirement, the shadow of what if hangs over them. What if they overstay? What if they disappear? What if they cause problems? But here's the hypocrisy. Nigerians are also among the most committed, law-abiding pilgrims. Year after year, they save up for Hajj, go through approved channels, travel in groups, and follow procedure. Their religious devotion is sincere, but it's never the headline. Instead, it's the rare case of abuse that becomes the rule, the exception that becomes the identity. It's not just unfair, it's lazy. Rather than fix gaps in management or enforce accountability across the board, countries like Saudi Arabia take the shortcut. Suspend the visas, blame the Africans, and move on. It's a policy of avoidance dressed as protection. And this profiling isn't only about religion. It extends into economics and class. A Nigerian business person trying to attend a summit in Riyadh is treated with the same skepticism as a low-income traveler. There's no differentiation, just one label, Nigerian. And that label becomes a border in itself, more powerful than any document. The worst part? This global suspicion becomes internalized. Young Nigerians start to believe that their passport is a curse, that international travel is a gamble, applying for a visa is an act of begging, that they are somehow less deserving of mobility. And when that belief settles in, the damage runs deeper than policy. It infects identity. So now we must ask, if these stereotypes are so strong, so persistent, and so normalized, what are they protecting? Because suspicion is never free-floating. It serves a purpose. And in this case, it creates a structure of control where access is determined not by intention, but by perception. This leads us to the next level of the issue. If Nigerians are stereotyped and filtered not because of what they've done, but because of how they are viewed, then maybe this isn't about misbehavior at all. Maybe this is about managing movement, deciding who gets to enter, who gets to participate, and who gets left waiting at the gate. So the next question becomes, is this truly about safety or about something deeper? Something designed to restrict African presence and influence even in religious spaces? If suspicion is the mindset, then control is the machinery. And nowhere is that machinery more refined than in the modern visa system, where decisions about who moves, when, and under what conditions have become a quiet form of global dominance. For Nigerians, this machinery doesn't just restrict, it disciplines. Because what Saudi Arabia did in 2025 was not simply deny access. It calibrated the rules. Not a full ban, not an official blacklisting, just enough restriction to remind certain travelers of their place. No outrage, no international scandal, just the cold efficiency of administrative power. Delay this, suspend that, restrict here. The result is compliance without confrontation. The suspension wasn't aimed at insurgents. It didn't target criminals. It focused on the average Nigerian, the small business owner attending an expo, the father visiting his daughter in Riyadh, the young woman going for Umrah. These were not security threats. They were participants in normal life, and yet they were stopped, quietly, respectfully, efficiently. That's how control works best, when it hides under the appearance of management. The real genius of this system is that it never needs to explain itself. When visa restrictions are put in place for Nigerians, there is no transparent process, no right to appeal, and no demand for evidence. The policy is announced, the borders respond, the traveler adjusts, end of story. And even more insidiously, the burden of proof doesn't fall on the government that blocks you. It falls on the Nigerian trying to enter. Prove you'll come back. Prove you're not a risk. Prove your purpose is legitimate. The process itself becomes a form of suspicion. And if you fail to convince, if your paperwork isn't perfect, if your name matches the wrong database, then you don't just lose a trip. You lose your dignity. This goes far beyond religion. It extends to every facet of cross-border interaction. In this system, mobility is not a right. It's a lever of control. And some people, some nationalities, are placed closer to that lever than others. Why Nigeria? Because it's the most populous black country in the world. It has a massive Muslim population with a proud Hajj tradition. Because it's rising economically, culturally, and diplomatically. And because control mechanisms always target rising influence before it becomes disruptive. This isn't just about managing who shows up in Mecca. It's about deciding who gets to participate in international systems on equal footing. And restricting Nigerian travelers, even temporarily, sends a subtle but powerful message. You're not fully in yet. In the case of Saudi Arabia, this form of control is wrapped in religious respectability. The kingdom is the guardian of Islam's holiest sites, and with that status comes the ability to determine access. But that guardianship has increasingly turned into gatekeeping. Instead of unifying the global Muslim community, it draws invisible lines between those who are welcome and those who are tolerated. Even the logistics argument falls apart under scrutiny. If overcrowding was truly the issue, why not strengthen registration systems, increase staff, and coordinate better with embassies? Why cut off entire countries from entry, especially those with massive diasporas and deeply rooted cultural ties to the pilgrimage? Because it's easier to control through denial than to govern through coordination. What's worse is that African countries often lack the diplomatic leverage to respond. They rarely challenge the exclusions. They don't push back with policy. They don't demand equity. And this silence creates a vacuum, one that Riyadh and others fill with rules that don't require justification. In this setup, Nigeria is not just excluded, it's conditioned. Conditioned to accept the denial as a natural part of the global hierarchy. Conditioned to beg for exceptions. Conditioned to play by the rules. It didn't help right. And over time, this conditioning becomes internalized. Nigerians start seeing their blocked movement not as injustice, but as inevitability. That's the final form of control, when people start regulating themselves before the system even needs to. So let's be clear. This is not about protecting Saudi airspace or controlling pilgrimage traffic. This is about power. And visas, especially the ones denied, are no longer documents. They are messages. And once you see the visa as a message, the next question becomes obvious. What kind of world are those messages building? And who gets to write them? To answer that, we now need to zoom out. Because these patterns aren't limited to Saudi Arabia. They're part of a much bigger global story of how African mobility has been turned into a security question rather than a human right. Once you realize that visa denial is a message, you start to notice how many countries are sending it, and how often that message is aimed at the African traveler. Because what happened with Saudi Arabia's suspension isn't just a Gulf phenomenon. It's a symptom of something bigger, a global pattern where African mobility, particularly Nigerian mobility, is systematically reframed as a problem to be managed rather than a freedom to be respected. Look across the world and the signs are everywhere. In Europe, Nigerian students with valid visas are routinely harassed at borders. In the UK, Nigerian academics and professionals, guests, are subjected to humiliating visa delays and denials under security protocols. France has tightened its rules for African applicants under the pretext of migration control, but the subtext is always the same. You are not neutral. You are not trusted. In the United States, Nigerian travelers were caught in the 2020 visa restrictions imposed by the Trump administration, grouped under security risk without any real explanation, while countries with worse track records of international threats were left untouched. Again, no crime, no incident, just a category. In South Africa, where Nigerians try to move within the continent, they still face xenophobia, red tape, and bureaucratic hostility, even among supposed African brothers. So if Africans are blocked from the West and targeted within Africa itself, where are they truly welcome? This is the real geography of mobility, not the one you see on a map, but the one built through embassies, visa centers, immigration offices, and digital border systems. A geography where the African body is flagged, the African name is paused, and the Nigerian passport is profiled long before the person behind it ever steps foot on a plane. And it's not about numbers, it's about narratives. Nigerians aren't the largest group of overstayers in Europe, nor do they commit more visa fraud than others, but their reputation precedes them. A reputation created by decades of biased headlines, viral scam stories, and a global media that rarely balances its critique with Nigerian brilliance, success, or sacrifice. So the border becomes less about territory and more about perception. And in that perception, Nigerians are cast in a permanent state of potential guilt. Even when they follow the rules, their compliance isn't seen as a sign of respect. It's treated as temporary good behavior. And the moment one person fails, the entire population is rebranded. The visa systems of today weren't designed just to process travelers. They were built to filter them, to separate those deemed safe from those considered suspect. It's a system of selective inclusion. And Nigerians, no matter how educated, wealthy, or devout, are often placed on the wrong side of that filter, because the rules are only half the story. The other half is who they're applied to. Take a closer look at visit visa rejections worldwide, and you'll see patterns that aren't based on behavior, but origin. Applicants from countries like Norway, Canada, or South Korea are assumed to be temporary visitors. Of course, they'll return home. But a Nigerian applicant? The presumption is that they want to overstay, disappear, work illegally, or claim asylum, no matter what documentation they provide. This isn't about individuals. It's about the citizenship hierarchy, a world where some passports open doors and others raise alarms, where movement is celebrated for some and criminalized for others. And what's most frustrating is that no amount of reform or progress inside Nigeria seems to change this default setting. Build better infrastructure? Still blocked. Launch digital passports? Still blocked. Improve biometric security? Still blocked. The problem isn't Nigeria's systems. It's the global bias against what a Nigerian represents. And that's why this isn't just a Saudi issue or a visa issue. It's a human rights issue. The right to move, to visit, to worship, to study, to trade. These are the lifelines of modern identity. Deny them consistently, and you're not just rejecting travelers, you're denying citizenship to the world. So the question is no longer just why these bans happen. It's, what is the world trying to prevent Nigerians from becoming? Because if you keep a population out long enough, you don't just control their movement, you control their image, their power, their voices. But if that's the aim, to dim the light of Nigerian presence globally, then the response must be something more than silent endurance. It must be organized, strategic, and political. But what can Nigeria and Africa do to break the cycle of quiet exclusion and claim their rightful space in the global order? Let us know in the comment section how to make nations start respecting Africans. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.